Hi, welcome back to Joshua chapter 6. And you may recall the story. Jericho is shut up against the Israelites, and everything is looking pretty difficult for Joshua and his followers. But God has promised in verse 2 that I've given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. And then in verse 3 up to verse 5, we have the command of the Lord. And this is what he has to do to capture Jericho. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. Then the walls of the town will collapse, and the people can charge straight into the town. Wonder what you would do if you were given an instruction like that. There used to be a t-shirt years ago would say variations on "Trust me, I'm a lawyer," or "Trust me, I'm a doctor." Perhaps you could have one that says "Trust me, I'm a pastor." And I don't know whether that makes you more or less worthy of trust. Depends on your point of view, I suppose. But it's almost like God is saying, look, trust me, I know what I'm doing. This may look a little bit out there, but I'm still God, and I really do know the best thing. And I'm not altogether sure how I would respond to a command from God like that. I want you to achieve your goal, says God. I want you to really receive everything that is on your heart, because I've put it on your heart. It's a God thing. It's not something you've just dreamt up. At the same time, in order for you to get from where you are now to where I want you to be, I want you to trust me by doing something that is not obvious. It is out of the ordinary. I mean, to march around a city, if you're an army, could be sensible in the sense that you are showing the defending inhabitants of that city how strong your army is, how intent you are on destroying them, how intent you are on capturing their walled city. So it makes sense from a military point of view in the sense of I'm going to show you who I am, and you should really be afraid. And I can imagine, as an inhabitant of a city with an army against you and seeing how big that army is and how they encircle the whole city, it could be a very fear-inducing experience. So perhaps it makes sense from that point of view. But the idea of marching around once per day for 6 days, and then on the 7th day to march around all those other times, and then to give a shout, and then the walls of the town will collapse. Maybe that would take some believing. What if God is saying to you, I want you to really trust me like you've never trusted me before. I want you to so enter in to who I am as your God, as your leader, as your Lord, that you will do even those things that seem to make the least possible logical sense. I don't think God is always calling us to do extraordinarily silly things or things that appear to be very silly. The question is am I willing to lay down my perception of how sensible I am, and perhaps even more importantly, how other people would view me, if that is the only way to achieve the things that God has asked me to do, or it's only the only way to get the outcome that I believe God's laid on my heart. Am I willing to lay all that down and say, hey, actually, I'm just going to go with what God says? Doesn't sound very usual, doesn't sound maybe very sensible, but I'm going to go with it because I believe that God is God. If that was the situation for you, I would really encourage you to then take that word that you believe God has given you to somebody else that you really trust and you know has your best interest at heart, and say to them, look, I've heard this, and before you say anything, I know how silly this sounds, and yet I believe it's a God thing. And then trust God. You both discern that's what God's heart is for you. Trust God with the outcome. Be bold, be strong, for the Lord your God is with you. Thought-provoking, challenging, possibly frightening. And yet, if it's God, it's going to work out. Be blessed.